Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Robert Clegg, and I represent Pro-Gun, New Hampshire, and I'm here in opposition to the bill.
My name is Susan Olsen. I am the Director of Legislation for the Women's Defense League of New Hampshire, and I am here also in opposition to the bill.
From my standpoint, and I enjoy listening to the two bills in education today, they were quite, I won't say amusing because it's the wrong name, but I listened to a lot of misinformation. And I will say again here, as we said in the other committee, transfers are already illegal if you don't know the person and you don't know that they're qualified and not prohibited from having a weapon. So if you sell a gun to somebody, you're doing the same thing that they're doing on the streets of Chicago. You're doing something illegal. So you don't need this bill. You certainly don't want to start telling people that they can't hand off a weapon from one to the other. And I know somebody said that's not what transfer means. Well, when you look at the prohibition for marijuana, you're prohibited from owning or possessing, meaning you can't even have it in your hand, even if you're on medical marijuana. So the possessing, the transfer, we look at it from the standpoint that the government means that you can't have it in your hands. If you're prohibited, you can't touch it. So we have a problem. So how do we know if we think the person is okay? This law would be, just as Representative Harrington said, an impossibility to satisfy. I'll also take the opportunity to say that I find it amusing, and I do find it amusing, that the medical society is in here talking about guns and how many people they harm, when more people die from medical malpractice. And I've been up here 22 years, and every time the lawyers get a hold of a medical malpractice, the doctors scream for immunity. So maybe gun owners ought to come in and start screaming for immunity. I don't know, maybe that works. The reality is gun owners have been the most respectful people in the state, the ones that very rarely commit an infraction, and they don't hurt people on purpose. And suicides are a different matter. You start including those in, your numbers start growing. That has nothing to do with honest, law-abiding citizens who own guns, enjoy guns, and carry for protection.
Some of you who are new to this committee, and I'm, Mr. Chairman, delighted to be back again this year. This is the fourth iteration of this bill. This is the sponsor's third try with this. She has resurrected her 2017 background check bill, House Bill 201, which failed on a roll call vote of 221 to 151, not quite 2 years ago. Her 2015 House Bill 650, which was voted ITL on a roll call of 236 to 124, just a month short of 4 years ago. And then the predecessor, House Bill 1589, which was actually a substitute bill, that failed in committee. But House Bill 109, just like 201 and 650 and HB 1589, appear to not acknowledge or maybe just understand the fact that federal law clearly prescribes who and how persons may legally, and I emphasize the word legally, purchase and sell firearms. 109, like its predecessors, would shift the burden of proof to the individual as opposed to the state, a radical shift in our standards of jurisprudence. The penalty portion of each of these versions takes activities which are currently legal, and you heard earlier, for a firearms instructor, I teach classes of 24 women at a time, disposing of one's private property.
Excuse me, would you please pay attention to the witnesses here? Thank you. Go ahead, continue.
And assign serious penalties to these activities. The language, as Senator Clegg said, conflates the term sale with the term transfer, and as such would effectively eliminate all the firearms training. It's also a property rights issue. This bill treats a firearm as a special class of property and would impose a different standard for a private transaction. Our laws do not treat one inanimate object differently from another. Why should firearms be held to a different, higher standard? You heard Representative Baldessaro reference some of the FBI crime statistics that state that nearly many as murders are committed with hammers and clubs than there are with rifles and shotguns. And according to this information, we should argue that every ownership transfer of hand tools should go through a licensed dealer and undergo a background check. And despite the protestation that, quote, nothing in this chapter shall be construed to end up as a registry, if you look in the purpose in the bill, it says very clearly that the purpose is to create a record of each sale. This is a violation of federal law. Registering each and every sale of a firearm is a necessary step to creating a national gun registry, specifically prohibited. 109 implies that law-abiding citizens cannot be trusted to follow the law, but the sponsors seem to engage in some magical thinking that criminals will, that federal and state firearms laws and regulations do not exist, and, oh well, even if they do, they're obviously insufficient. Pretending that the legal sale and purchase of firearms is not clearly addressed, prescribed, and regulated is at best disingenuous. However, 201, risen from the ashes, 109, risen from the ashes of 201, 650, and 1589, does just that. It pretends that current law does not exist and is not good enough. Gun control is a long-term game. Disarmament, the ultimate goal, is a longer-term game. History tells us without fail, legislation leads to registration, which leads to confiscation. I urge you to vote 109 just like you did 201 and 650 and 1589 in expedient to legislate.
You have written testimony you can provide to the clerk with that.
I do, yes, sir.
Any questions? No, thank you. Representative Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked the prime sponsor a question, and she came back with, that rape laws don't protect from people from raping still. Rape still happen even though we pass laws. So the question that I had to her, and I was wondering if you could answer it, will this bill, if passed, stop the illegal gun sales with the criminals?
No.
No, of course it won't. Of course it won't. This is hamstringing law-abiding citizens deliberately, in my personal opinion, from the purchase and possession of firearms. Makes it that difficult. It will put me as an instructor out of business.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative McNally.
I've been listening to all the testimony, and the bill states requiring background checks for commercial firearm sales. My husband's a retired Marine also. We both have weapons. We've never been able to buy them without a background check. I don't understand the purpose of this, because the people that they want to get a background check from are not going to do it anyway. They're not going to even know whether they have guns because they've obtained them illegally, so I can't see the purpose. This is already a law.
Is that a question?
Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct. Yes, you are correct.
I would just suggest to the committee that we will have plenty of time to share our thoughts with each other when we exact on this bill, that our purpose is to solicit real information. Please refrain from any would you believe questions or rhetorical questions. Representative Tessman.
Just a quick question. I see a button on various people here, including yourself, no hitting. What's that about?
Oh, my no hitting button. That is in memory of being assaulted during a vote recount by the sponsor of this bill, I think, because she doesn't like me as a gun owner.
That's okay.
Thank you for the question.
Croc TV.